Welcome back for Season 2 of the Mom with Issues podcast. I'm your host, resident mom with issues, Alice Rainey. A lot of life has happened between Seasons 1 and 2, and I promise we'll get into that later this season. Guess what? I've still got issues, a whole slew of them. And I'm thinking if you're here, you may have a few issues too. Issues that make being a mom different, harder, and more colorful than the one-dimensional idea of a mom present all over social media. So grab a tasty beverage, a comfy seat, the good chocolate, and let's unpack this stuff. I know I'm not alone because this season we're talking with friends. For our inaugural episode of Season 2, we're trying something new. This season, we're going in a new direction. Season 2 will be full of interviews and stories from other moms with issues, from domestic violence, disability, substance abuse, and so much more. There's no better way to start this season off than by speaking with Lee.
Lee is a former foster youth, advocate for foster children, voice for victims of domestic violence, and a badass mama bear working her way through a divorce that could have cost her her life. You can hear more about Lee's journey through our broken foster care system on the Word of the State podcast, episode 17, titled Lee. Lee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be on here with you.
Oh, I'm so just pleased to have you and so honored that you would decide to share your story here because it is amazing. You are so awe-inspiring. That's why I wanted to reach out to you because I just could not believe what I was seeing. And you're so brave and so strong. And I think people would benefit from hearing from that. So thank you.
And thank you for providing a safe space for me to come and talk about these things. And this will be my first time sharing my entire story. So I'm very excited for this to be the place in which I do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I do have one important question before we begin. And I know I did not clear any questions with you. And I promise it's not a gotcha. But
Okay.
It feels timely. Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Lee, man or bear?
Bear.
Yeah.
Bear.
It's very strongly team bear over here.
Yes. And
I'm sorry,
when I was talking about that, I think it was interesting. If you saw on my page, even my 12-year-old son chose the bear.
Yes, I did see that. So it's the demographics of this pod are about 77% women, 9% non-binary. So like it's real team bear over here. And I feel like the 14% of male listeners, like I see if you're here, then you get why we're team bear. So,
Yeah.
Your son, very, very smart young man. Very solidly team bear, and we appreciate him. So good job raising a boy that knows the difference, Mama.
Thank you.
Speaking of your page, you are transcending trauma on TikTok, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. And I will link to your socials if you'd like in the show notes at the end.
Awesome. That would be awesome, especially with that whole foster care awareness month thing coming up too. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, Lee. So
let's get into it.
The floor is yours. Let's go.
Thank you so much. Well, first off, thank you for everyone that's listening and taking time out of their day to come and listen into my lived experience. This is going to be my first time sharing my entire story, and hopefully this can give some insight to other people that are in similar situations. And really my goal in the end, I think I've said since the beginning, is on my way out of abuse, I'm taking people with me. I'm trying to take people with me and educate them a little bit on some terms and how I was able to get to this point, although it will never look the same for every person. Each obstacles that we have to jump are different. So when I was looking back over things and I was trying to decide, like, where do I start? And I was like, well, duh, everything starts at the beginning, right? But
I lost your audio for 1 second. Can you back up and where you said everything starts at the beginning?
Yes. When I was thinking about this podcast and like how we were going to do this and starting at the beginning, for me, it was really hard to start at the beginning because that's not really where the story truly begins. Although it does, the beginning was so fantastical, and I didn't recognize that till later on. But for the sake of giving timeline, I'll start at the beginning. When I first met my husband, one of the first things that he had recognized in me was that I was an advocate and that I was a former foster youth. And at the time of meeting him, I was kind of in a little bit of emotional distress. I was uncovering more about my foster care story. I was becoming very, very known online. I had previously had a TikTok that had over 35,000 followers, and I was
Wow.
really sharing. I was doing a protest to get my files, and he was so supportive of all this. When I first met him, how I always describe him is he went to a quarry and dug me crystals by hand himself for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought me wildflowers and he played music, which I think me and you talked about this a little. He spoke a lot through music and things that he verbally wouldn't say, but wanted to communicate. At least that's what I thought early on.
Mm-hmm.
Our very first meeting was over a telephone conversation. I was in distress and I had met him on Facebook dating. We'd never met in person to this point. And the very first conversation before ever meeting this person, before knowing terms like love bombing, before understanding my attachment style, before understanding my inner childhood wounds or why I was seeking what partners I was, before understanding any of that, just blindly walking in, this human was love bombing me to the T. I am beautiful. I am ethereal. I am magical. I'm sharing my poetry. He's looking at me. He's listening. He's showing emotions to me. I was like, this person actually sees me. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
person sees me and they hear me and they know me. I felt in those moments that I was connected with my soulmate
Mm-hmm.
on a phone, having not met him. And I didn't even recognize that off the bat, the increase in how I was feeling, the changes in my body, like the changes in my thought patterns, the instant latching on to him that I did because of the way that he spoke to me. So fantically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I met him, I was already convinced that this guy's gonna be great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've never been spoken to this way. So when he's bringing me rocks in the beginning, he's bringing me flowers, he's letting me cry. He's also listening to me tell him all of my trauma. Now, as a former foster youth, something that was taken away from me was my identity as a
Mm-hmm.
person. And so he knew I was struggling with all these things. He's listening intently as I'm crying and I'm explaining the abandonment wounds, the pain that I experienced from separation, my fear, my willingness to stay in unsafe places to not be abandoned. Like, I'm literally putting my trauma on the table because I think that this person loves me despite it all, when really I never ever in the beginning, looking back now, paid attention. He never told me a thing about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back in the beginning, he never told me a single thing about himself until things got rough. And he needed empathy, I think, to pull from, is my guess now.
Mm-hmm. So
So,
let me stop you right there real
yeah,
quick. So he never told you anything about himself, and you were so deeply in love, right? Is
right.
it, when you look at it now, if you can look at it with kinder eyes, do you think that it's possible that one thing that, if we're not going to silver lining abuse and any of the tragic stuff that happens, but if you gave him nothing, if he gave you nothing back and you gave him everything, and what you fell in love with is who you are, right? Because all he was doing was mirroring back who you are. So,
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put that. And I guess in my mind later on in healing, I thought similar to what you just said. I thought all the love I felt was my love, like radiating and then bouncing off this dude and hitting me back in the face. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure that what I was receiving, I'm not sure what I ever received love. I know I say think. I am 6 months as of today or out of abuse. So
Wow.
sometimes the
Congratulations.
cognitive dissonance is still in the background a little tiny bit, but it
Mm-hmm.
does fade a lot for me with time. Um, but yes, that's crazy to think of looking back that everything that I thought was love was me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're a beautiful person. So I just kind of wanted to call that out. I'm sorry to interrupt. So
Oh
carry
no, you're good. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So also in the beginning, so that's that we now know to call that, you and me know to call that mirroring, but I
on.
didn't. I wouldn't have known that terminology to Google it, or like I wouldn't even notice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So here we are. We're stepping in, and I noticed right off the bat that he's not as attached as me, right? He's avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
But what he did next, I think, is foundational for my story. Very early on, so we meet, we hook up, we get intimate, and I'm ready to move him in right now because I want to pause real quick and say that former foster youth are going to be more at risk for reading attachments like love bombing, because if you think about my history, or you think about the history of foster youth, if they've been in multiple placements, you're moving in with a stranger immediately. You
Mm-hmm.
need to gain the approval of that stranger to have your needs met and to feel love. Love is a foundational need that a child has. And so if you put children into these situations where they're forced to connect with strangers, and even if the stranger is not really kind the whole way through their experience, they know to get love, they have to stay with these people regardless. Otherwise, they're the problem for being moved, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
a setup for later on in my life that went very wrong, because other people may be saying, they moved so quickly, like I wouldn't have done that. Maybe you wouldn't have, but I was taught that this was how attachment worked
Mm-hmm.
my whole life. Um, I just, I didn't think twice as long as they were kind and giving me attention and loving. I wasn't thinking twice. I had been taught this. I'd
Mm-hmm.
also been taught to be love bombed. If
Mm-hmm.
you think about foster parents, when they first get you, they love you, you're great until you have a problem. Then you're not the child that they can save anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was built for this without knowing what I was walking into.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when I noticed his distance, I want to share with you a poem I found, and I only started writing all of this when I got with him. And I think this will really tell, and then we can kind of move forward into where things started getting murky. But in the beginning, when I noticed that there was something a little off, but I didn't know how to word it, I wrote this in my poetry diary. If I am forced to not allow all of these emotions, all of the energy to flow, to take its process, if I am told to not seek relief, then I will never grow. In the wilderness, the need for open spaces to be is an instinct that I cannot deny. In the beginning, I was already wondering if this was okay. I had this instinctual feeling that even though he was giving me love, he already had started taking it away, but it wasn't big enough for me to notice yet. Like
Mm-hmm.
I knew it and I could feel it, but it wasn't so big that I was like, I don't want to talk about that. That's so subtle. Everything else is so fine.
Mm-hmm.
I married him 3 months after meeting him. I married him in an attempt to show him that I would not leave him again. I will explain that I left my husband successfully one time before marrying him. In a moment where I was thinking properly, but he told me I was acting mentally ill, I kicked him out of my house. He tried to kick in my door. The police came. After it was all said and done, because I did not have support, I did not have a village, I became so upset with myself and reverted to thinking like, he wasn't that bad and I've gotten rid of this great guy over something so tiny, and maybe he's right. I am too emotional and I shouldn't have shown this emotion. The conversation went like this is where this argument came from. He told me a girl that he had priorly dated, which was his best friend's sister, had been raped by a friend of theirs, and he didn't believe her. And I was angry that he didn't believe her when this was a woman he had spent years dating in the past. It's his best friend's sister on top of that. And here's this girl's brother and my husband telling her she's a liar.
Ugh.
I had kicked him out of my house that day. He told me that that was fantical, that I was throwing away a whole relationship over a disagreement. He started minimizing. What I did isn't that bad compared to you throwing me away as a person. You know, that's just a conversation, and it didn't even involve you, and it didn't even happen to you. And at that time, that gaslighting worked. I was like, oh, it is me. And I guess I wasn't there. And I guess I wouldn't know this girl. And I don't know anything. You're right. If I promised not to call the police was one of the promises, and I had to promise to never leave, no matter what, regardless of what happened, never leave. And he told me that day when I took him back, the door is always open. If you ever left me or tried, you know, you were hurt or something, my door will always be open. Like if you leave, you can always come back. That'll be important later on, because to someone with an abandonment wound, the idea that you could leave and then go back sounds crazy. It sounds good. It sounds like, okay, that is love. Okay, we can make mistakes and I can come back from this. You're not just going to get rid of me. Okay, this sounds good. If I start to fast forward past the gaslighting and all of this, there's the girls on Facebook, the adding the girls, the lying to me about adding the girls, the telling me somebody else did, and how do you know I'm having conversations? I'm just adding them. And so started my insecurities. I felt smaller. I couldn't figure out where this marriage went wrong. Where'd that guy go? Where's the man I marry? Where? There's no more rocks. There's no more flowers. But there's still a lot of breadcrumbing and love bombing and things going on back and forth. So I'm still hooked. I'm like, I can still fix this. So we're about 6 months in. I've dealt with cheating. I didn't know it then that it was full cheating. I was dismissing it as other things, but it was cheating. I was dealing with lying. I had a person that I did not know that I was married to. He was living off of my money. Somehow, in the midst of all the fighting and the chaos, I forgot to pay attention to the fact that he never did get another job after he got fired from that one. And that he's living off of me. All of my day's focus became around him. Waking up in the morning, cleaning to make sure he was okay, because he was OCD, so everything had to be perfect. And his OCD is actual OCD from trauma. We'll talk about his background at some point, but he was heavily abused as a youth, and he would use that to manipulate me. He knew I was empathetic, so later on he'll bring this up. Remember, all the way up into this point, like even 6 months in, I don't know everything about my husband. I'm just trying to rectify the wrongs still going on. He starts, I think he's into drugs at this point, because I was pretty sure he was. But when I would try to address it, he would gaslight me. He would be like, you don't know what someone on drugs looks like because you've never been on these drugs. You've never been addicted. And I was like, yeah, but I can tell that you're acting erratically. He also knew I had autism. He would tell me that my autism was a crutch that I was leaning on. I'm not really disabled. He had Joe Rogan playing 24/7, if that helps you identify the personality type.
Yep.
Okay. So along this is this spirituality I want to backtrack to. I forgot. Sorry, ADHD. Somewhere in the beginning,
Let me just say, if a man has nothing else, he will always have the audacity. Because, sir, what do you mean you don't have a job, but you have the time to criticize all the things? I'm sorry. What? You got nothing but audacity, and you got a lot of it. So,
oh my gosh. In the midst of all this is a survivalist mindset, is a man that's also telling me that he's helping me to teach my son, you know, some survival skills. And to be honest with you, what he said he was teaching my son, let's be transparent here, was masculinity. He made mentions from day one that my son being raised by a mother without a father in the picture, Mind you, he can't have children of his own. He has none. He's desperate for a child. So he walks into this picture thinking me and Bentley are manipulatable and that he's going to take over this parenting role and he's going to mold my son into him from day one.
Yeah.
Survivalist mindset wise, he thought he was going to make us his weird little family that was going to go like live in the woods where he would seclude us from everybody because everybody sucks but him. Type deal. But then there's the spiritual. When I first met him, I wasn't Christian. I don't know what I was. I can't tell you. I believed in something like God, or maybe it was God, but it's hard to talk about this part, and this is the first place I'm talking about this really, but he twisted a belief from Robert Monroe. The Robert Monroe Institute does some really cool stuff with binaural beats. If everyone listens to the stuff on the CIA Gateway Project, you'll know who Robert Monroe is. But if you don't, he's a guy who started having out-of-body experiences. And his institute and his work with the CIA is very different than his personally written books. And my husband's father had found these books in the back of a car in the 70s. And out of a mix of mental illness and drug addiction fueled with narcissism, he took these books and started teaching them to his son, my husband. My husband was raised under these beliefs that Robert Monroe says, this is the answer. This is our existence. And I'll give you a synopsis that you decide before you come here everything that happens to you. You sat with someone and you decided to come here and enter into this physical body for like character development, so to say. And you'll live multiple lifetimes and then you'll move on to something else. And in the end, essentially, what he believed was that we become alien food. Now, I don't follow that all the way to its fruition, but there's some things from it that when the way it was presented was helpful for processing my trauma. And he was acting like he was my spiritual guide, here to help me heal my childhood trauma. No joke. That is how he presented himself to me. That the universe would not have crossed our paths on accident. He's here for a reason. He's here to teach me. So I'm thinking, this is serious shit, man. Like, this is my destiny. I gotta pay attention. I need to listen. I'm now looking for content based around this to solidify these beliefs and filling my environment to confirm what he's saying to me. So we were literally living in delusion for a period of time. I like to say it like he painted a fantastical world. And inside of the door of the fantastical world, it was shiny and it was bright. And I walked right into the door, not realizing that the door was the room to a prison that he made for me. But from the outside, when the door opened, it was glittering, it was gold, it was shining. I could see the grass inside. It looked beautiful. This is amazing. And then I got inside and realized, yeah, in this small confine, in only this space, will it be this.
Yeah.
So at some point, I'm calling him out. I didn't know you shouldn't do that. Every time I'm fighting for my sanity in these arguments that keep happening around his behaviors, or I'd try to stop bringing them up, but then it would build up. I'd be doing dishes. I'd be trying so hard. I'd be cleaning up. I'd try not to nag. I was trying to process my own feelings because he kept telling me that my feelings were my own fault and that I needed to handle my feelings. They are not his responsibility. And I was like, okay, so I need to evolve this way. I'm a very anxiously attached person. And I now need to somehow find a way to stay attached in a different way than I know how. So I was giving him space. He would stonewall me, that kind of stuff. When we go to California, I'm still under the belief that, like, I am the problem and I will get better with time, so will the marriage. That he is right. And as long as I learn to become less emotional, care less about my trauma, live less in my past, and live in this world of toxic positivity going forward and manifest and believe, that this will get better. So when he starts talking about going to California, I'm excited. This is presented to me like an experience I've never had. He is from California originally. He is acclimated. He graduated from over there. He's aware of everything, right? So he
Mhm.
plans he plans with me in a sense that, like, he didn't plan with me, but he did. He picked the area, but he didn't pick the cabin, and then he helped with nothing else. He was like, this is where I want to go first. I said, I want to be in Reading. And he was like, no, you don't. Or we'll end up there, after we're done seeing where I grew up at. And I was like, oh, so we're going to go, I don't know. Okay. At that time, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to see where he grew up. I'm going to learn about my freaking husband. Okay, I'm going to learn something about this man I've already done married. Oh my God.
You're like, ooh, side quest, new information.
Yeah, I'm like, this is an adventure. Cool. So that's when the simplicity abuse really began. I call it simplicity abuse. I don't know another term. It was under coercion that he decided, like, you're going to need to take less with you to California. Valid. I have a lot of shit. So I got a storage unit and I started filling it. And he was like, no, that's useless. And like, you should have less. And I was like, okay. And he was explaining to me about how we only need our basic needs. And I was like, that makes sense because we're going across the United States. I didn't think this would last forever. Mind you, this whole time I'm hand washing clothes in the bathtub, and I think it's okay. He mentioned it in the beginning. Now, he didn't have to threaten it in the beginning. In the very beginning, he laid a foundation for expectation without threatening. Like, he would just make critical comments, and I was still very sensitive in the beginning, so I adapted myself early on. So I'm already washing clothes in the bathtub to save money. I no longer will put my shoes in the dryer because I've been yelled at once, that kind of thing. This is different. This is simplicity. Like, he's like, you need 2 shirts,
Oh.
2 pair of pants. Your son doesn't need all those toys. Your son does not need those devices. You do not need to have that most expensive iPhone. I sold my car, my Mitsubishi Eclipse, and it was a 2006 Mitsubishi Eclipse. It was the sunset orange, the same as Fast and Furious. Terrible movies. Love the car. But I just can't with Paul Walker. I'm sorry. We won't get into it. But
We're
I
putting
love
a pin
this
in
car.
that. I'll come back to you on TikTok for that one.
Yeah. So I sold my car and I'm thinking this is a chance for a new start. I even tell TikTok at this point, I delete my 35,000 followers of TikTok on my old TikTok, make the new one where you found me. And I said, this is my journey to overcoming my childhood trauma. If anyone goes all the way back to the beginning of my TikToks, I was still with my husband. And I was like, this is my journey to going somewhere where I don't have to tell someone I'm a former foster youth. I've learned this lesson via this man here. And so my past doesn't affect me anymore. Okay, delirious, like Joe Rogan style delirious. That's what I was. He was listening to David Goggins, if that also helps you.
Yes, yes, it does.
And I'm like, I mean, I just don't know why David has to scream at us while he says it. I mean, I don't know. He'd been screaming real loud, and I'm like, it was the most simple message. It could have been better conveyed by speaking.
It's like, sir, you're at a 12. I need you at like a strong.
No, he didn't listen to Tate, thank gosh. He knew better than to be so directly. I'm sure in private he listened to Tate, but not out loud. But he somehow convinced me these two were like, these are personal motivation. He needs this as a man to like prep himself in the morning to get ready to go cheat on me and do drugs. And I'm like, oh, okay.
There's that audacity.
The audacity, right? Like that you didn't even actually hold a job the whole time or even like provide anything, but you're teaching masculinity. You didn't do anything to help. You didn't even carry bags or like everything stopped. But yeah, crazy. So we get ready to go to California. We picked. So we're headed towards Apple Valley, but we're going first, and this is most important, up to Big Bear Lake because history will repeat itself. I did not know that his father had strangled his mother in this area. And I don't know why he took me there originally, right? I'm excited. I'm happy. This man is already irritated with me because I'm standing up for myself, but I'm faithful. And he can't find a reason to really get rid of me, but he doesn't like me anymore. But I'm kind of what he's looking for because I'm, in his eyes, I was staying home. I was cleaning. I
Right.
have income. Like, I was the modern wife that he was looking to show off to his like other friends or whatever. I was a show,
Yeah.
if anything, a show or like some kind of performative way of saying I've moved up in the world to him. It was very interesting. So we go to California, we go to cross the country, and that is when I realized I did not know my husband before I got to California. Nobody knows this except for you and me, and now your listeners. On the Greyhound rides to California was the first time I saw, and I will name it directly. I am allowed. I'm just going to say my husband is fully diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder clinically. So there are some words or terms that I use in regards I'm allowed to legally.
Mm-hmm.
He had a full personality collapse. I was frustrated. And I was talking to this lady in Cleveland. We'd been at the bus station for 2 days. I've paid thousands for these bus tickets. I'm sleeping on a bench. It's unsafe in Cleveland. I'm going to get moving towards California. So I'm upset with the lady at the front. I'm not being rude. I'm being direct. And I'm standing on my grounds while she's acting very inappropriately. Instead of helping me, of course, he sides with her.
Mm.
I was so frustrated after the girls, after everything. This is my hopes. This is my dreams. And I couldn't believe, like I got frustrated and went over in a corner to cry. And I was just talking to myself and I was really freaked out. And he came over and he began infantilizing me because I'd embarrassed him for the first time in public.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a whole personality collapse. He
Mm.
came over with the face, his whole face changed. His eyes, he was steaming. I think he would have assaulted me right there if there hadn't been people. So he was like, "You're right. You should unalive yourself. You're absolutely worthless. You can't even effing schedule a bus properly to get us anywhere. What are you good for?" So he's encouraging me to unalive myself. I'm distraught. I'm upset. But this is my dream and it's already falling apart. I'm tired. I've slept on a bench. I'm hungry. I'm confused on top of this. At that time, when I went to have a breakdown, a full breakdown at that moment, the way that he looked at me and got down on my level, eye to eye, and he was like, "I would not care if you unalived yourself at all. That wouldn't be my problem. If you're stupid enough that you want to have to repeat this same life cycle, you go ahead." And I was like, wow. So in that moment, I knew, because he was now telling me to unalive myself. I'm like, this is another level of something. Like, this is disgusting. Like, how do you care about me or pretend that you care about me, but then tell me to end my life when you know I'm in distress? I'm an autistic person. I need support. I have a child with me that's medically complex. We're crossing the country to move. You haven't paid for this. You're not helping me. You're not packing the bags. You're not doing anything but criticizing me. I started losing it. I was thinking, I should stay. I shouldn't even go. He comes back. He apologizes. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. The whole way to California, he didn't sit next to me on the Greyhound buses. He stopped acting protective of me. We get up to California to our cabin. It's in Bear Lake. It's very high in the mountains. I pay for it to get us up there. We're exhausted. I'm emotional. I'm thinking, okay, maybe it'll go better now. I wake up from a little nap after our little bus ride, and he goes, "Let's go hiking." I said, okay. All right, let's go hiking. I love hiking. He's happiest outdoors. I get my son ready. I go to grab my pack. He says, "You don't need a pack. I'll carry the pack. It's heavy. You're tired. Like, you don't need to carry a pack." And with his survivalistic mindset, like I had explained, to carry a pack means I either needed to carry a fully packed pack or else there was no point in carrying one. And I certainly didn't want to carry a fully packed pack when I thought we were just going on a little hike. So I thought, hey, bro, if you want to be that prepared for just going around the corner, then fine. I'll come with you for the fun, but yeah, you can carry the backpack. Little did I know how far we were going. I didn't think this was going to be, he didn't tell us. He wouldn't tell us where we were going. It started out normal. I'm taking pictures. I start getting tired. My son has neurofibromatosis type 1. His legs are starting to hurt from nerve damage. I'm like, we need to stop. He's like, no, we can stop when we get to this point. He was always like that. Push, 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 push through the tears, push through the pain, push more, as far as you can go. Doesn't care if you have asthma. The altitude will be good for your lungs. It'll actually cure you if you ask him.
Mm-hmm.
So we're up in this high altitude. I started to notice that I couldn't think. Like, I started looking around and I'm like, I didn't even know how long I've walked. I need water. It's 107.
Wow.
I'm on a mountain that's above sea level in the California next to the Mojave Desert. Like, I am, you know where this is. I am up there in a place I've never been. Now, in Pennsylvania, we don't have mountains like that. When I got there, I was like, oh gosh, this is a mountain. Holy, we have hills. None of our mountains are like that. So I am so unprepared.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot. I notice. I also notice that it's harder to lift my legs. Like, I'm thinking, like, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I'm autistic, so sometimes I don't check in with my body as easily as other people do, or when I should.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it takes until I've reached a point where I go, hey, that's wrong. You're not working right. So by that point, I'm pretty sure we had some beginnings of altitude sickness, me and my son.
Mm-hmm.
My husband began screaming at us. I remember crying. I remember sobbing. I remember begging. I remember feeling delirious. Mind you, at this point, we're 15 miles into the hike.
Mm-hmm.
It's already through the whole day. I still haven't had any water. He won't give me the life straw. I'm pointing at a puddle, and I have a picture of it. I'm pointing at this puddle, and I'm like, I will drink from this puddle if you just give me that straw. Like, I don't even care what's in this water. And he was like, no, you can get there when we get to where we're going. And he wouldn't tell me where we were going. And I'm just like, I freaked out. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. Like, is this what you're going to do? Like, this isn't fun. I need water. Like, I cannot go further. I had this feeling in my stomach that he would just keep walking me. There was no destination. He had never walked us like this before. He was so calm. He was not irritated, no matter how emotionally upset I became. He stayed so calm. I was like, what in the, like, normally if I became emotionally distraught, he would freak out.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't be accepting of that, but he's calm as day. He's so calm. So I'll turn around and he's like, well, if you're leaving, you're walking yourself back on your own. I'm thinking, I don't know where I'm going through these woods, but I'll get there. So I do. I walk me and my son back. The entire way, he followed us in the woods. He followed us not directly, but he was hiding behind things.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure why that was. I kept looking back, and I didn't know if he thought that he hadn't trained me well enough, that despite his camo wearing all where he went, he always blended in with the environment. He was very specific about how he smelled. He wanted to be able to hide, walk quiet, like on a regular hike. Everything was survival play with us. So like, I'm like, he's following us. So I speed up my pace. I get into the cabin, and in about an hour later, he comes in, and he's real calm. And I can't recall to you. I'm sorry, listeners, that this is difficult. So I can't recall the exact conversation. My son was asleep in the living room of this like Airbnb, and he comes into the bedroom of the Airbnb. We have some kind of mini conversation. It is not an argument. I can see that clear as day. We're not arguing. I think I said something to him, and he began strangling me for the first time.
Wow.
He just looked at me and started strangling me, like leapt across the room, lunged at my throat. I fell back onto the bed. I can hear the sounds coming out of me. I remember tossing about, and like then I realized just lay still, because he had never assaulted me, he'd never slapped me, he'd never punched me up until this point. So like, I'm really panicked. I mean, he's not just strangling me, he's got his hand over my mouth and nose. So I just laid still and was crying when he let off of me, okay, and got up and let go. I turned over immediately into the pillows and I began crying. He walked out of the room. was breathing and like pacing around and then came back in and then told me how this was my fault if I hadn't frustrated him the whole way, and he knows he shouldn't do this, and if this changes how I feel about him, and he's so sorry. It was the only time I was shown empathy, was the first time he strangled me.
Wow.
He was so sorry. That's when he's starting to tell me really in depth about his childhood abuse. He's like, this is what happened to me. This is why I'm like this. And I can do better. And I'll show you I can do better. I will show it to you. I know these are just words. Like, he's begging. And I'd never seen someone try to stay in my life as a former foster youth. And I was very confused. Plus, I had a lack of oxygen to my brain. I was in shock. I couldn't think. The attack was pretty violent, and I was not, all I could think was, whatever you want. Okay, yes, calm down. I was in such primal mode that I realized that I needed to calm him and agree with whatever he was saying to rectify anything at that point. So he calms down, and I go into the bathroom. I sat down on the floor, and I remember sobbing, and I was thinking, my love has literally tried to kill me, and I can't stay here now. I can't be here now. And I kept thinking, my love, he's hurt me, like in a poetic type way in my head, because I'm like that. And I was just like so broken that I couldn't even up until this point find a single human in my life to just love me and not hurt me. So I started making bargains. Is he better than my abusers as a child? What is worth staying here for? Can I make it a way that I don't have to leave? Is kind of what I was doing in my head without recognizing what I was doing. I was trying to find a way to make him less bad so that I could stay, and it would verify like someone would. Somebody that I could be loved, that I could fix this. Like I was worthy of not being abused, and I was going to somehow verify that. It doesn't work that way, but because of trauma thinking, because of my childhood, because when I asked for help as a child, I didn't receive it, because I was unheard, because of the way society sets us all up to begin with, I just was like, okay, well, it's not that bad. I didn't understand strangulation. I thought, I don't have a black eye. I started comparing myself to other victims and was like, it can't be that bad. Like, I'm okay. I started gaslighting myself so that he didn't have to ever again. And that day was the day I became silent. I became a silent wife. I became an anxious wife. The dishes were always done. The house was always quiet. I will never bother you. And he hated it. He started hating that I was now afraid. He used to call out my faces and make fun of them. Between that first strangulation, there were 3 more that happened in California. After we got down off that mountain, I began calling the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. I'm like, I need help getting off the mountain. I don't have money for an Uber ride. I'm stuck up here in DV. I didn't explain to them like the full amount of DV, like that I had been strangled, but I'm like, I'm in DV, I need down. He took us to his friend's house, starts another argument, strangles me the second time on top of my son at his friend's house. His friend and his friend's wife heard what was going on. And that night, he was just threatening to leave me. It's a narcissistic thing. He always threatened to leave me, but he never actually attempted to leave. In my situation, I was never fully discarded. He never actually left. He would stir my trauma by packing things and saying, I'm leaving, and taking his ring off. And then he would wait while I would have emotional upsets. He never actually would go out the door. He never would leave. Where the hell was he going? Nobody wants this dude. But at that time, I didn't know. I thought he was so wanted back then. I was like, no, you can't leave. All the women will love you. And now I'm like, every woman was like, bro, he was so ugly. And I'm like, why did you not tell me before I got Why did you tell me after? Why not before I married him?
That is one of like the harshest realizations that a friend can make. It's like, girl, you were doing charity work. It's like, I need you to point that out, please.
Right. So I think it blew my mind that a woman and a man, and now the woman in this situation, his friend's wife, she wanted to help me, to clarify for listeners. But her husband told her she wasn't allowed to call the police for me that night. But they did say we had to leave their house, and they didn't care where we went safety-wise. So we became homeless for a night. We slept in the desert without a tent or anything. I took pictures and posted them online and was like, look how pretty it is. Everything's so perfect, and lied the entire way through this. The third time he strangled me, I finally called the police, and it was about 30 days after that first one and the second one. In this instance, it was about that time we're going to bring up so people can understand. When I was with my husband, he would go through these stages at the time that I didn't recognize. I didn't even realize it was a cycle until now looking back. He would just stop giving me attention or really acknowledging me. I could feel the disconnect, or he would stop having intimacy with me at all, which was a big place for me as a trauma person to, I don't know. Intimacy was a big deal to me. He knew that. So after starving me, which is the proper term, of intimacy for since the first day he strangled me, I'm now been starved of intimacy in between all that. So I'm really thinking oh my gosh, this is my fault. I'm really blaming myself through this and thinking I've done something somehow. So he finally gives me intimacy and affection, and he gets up off of my body and looks at me and says, do you know why I do that? And by the way, this is on court record. I mentioned this in my court hearings as well, just so the judge knew, because she's a girl and she needs to know. So, and I was like, I'm in sexy brain. I'm how you do what? Which part? I'm not thinking about what he's saying, because the fucking audacity, excuse my language, cut that if you need.
Nope.
But the audacity of this dude to go, why I give you love and then take it away. My hearing stopped. I'm pretty sure I thought I heard ringing. I was like, did heaven and hell align just now? Did a human that is alive just say this to me out loud, that they take love away from? Wait a minute. So I start arguing. I'm like, no, I'm fighting for my last bit of sanity. I'm crying. We just had intimacy. And now you're telling me. I was like, what? He goes, if I was nice to you all the time and I loved you all the time, you would get bored of me and you'd run away. But because I'm not, and I take it away, look, you're still here. You chase me. You women don't understand yourselves. You don't understand your own psychology. And I was like, oh. So I started arguing. That night was the third night he strangled me. And the first time I called the police, they came out, took photographs. They said, you got to run. We cannot help you because we're California, so we're running low on funding right now. And we just can't help you, but we would love to. The greatest cops ever. These cops wanted to help me. I would say your California police in behavior, the ones that I had at that particular time, they wanted to do more than they were able. They were kind. They were trauma informed. They were able to get a lot of information out of me without traumatizing me or threatening me or forcing me. They just coaxed me to talk in ways that would give them what they were looking for until they identified him. Because at first, after I called them, I'm like, I'm not giving you his name. No, this is too real. No, turn back. This is not. And he understood. So he was calmly getting the information from me anyway to identify who my abuser was. Pulled him up on a phone, showed me a picture, and I lost it. And he was like, it's okay, you have to leave. And it was the first person that told me, if you do not leave, he will kill you. Because he was the first person to tell me that I had strangulation marks at that point. He was like, people that strangle you are the people that murder, okay? They murder their partners. You need to leave. You need to go back to Pennsylvania. So I'm like, oh my gosh. I don't know what to do. I couldn't get help leaving while he was there. There was no one to help remove him from the situation. So I get back to Pennsylvania. I move in with his family. I see how they are. It was horrible at his family's. They were just as bad as he was. You could see where this came from. My son was also abused in all of this, and I want to tread lightly with that. At this time, I'm not aware of the abuse that has happened all the way up till we get back to Pennsylvania, excuse me. When we get there, I witness him slapping my son across the face with an open hand and then screaming at my son for crying and
Ugh.
admitting that he slapped my son for crying, for
Ugh.
showing emotion.
A
His
kid,
cousin
a
was
kid
like
cried.
drunk there
Like,
too.
uh,
Go ahead,
jeez.
sorry.
No, I was just saying a kid cried. Yes, that is very out of character for
Yeah.
them.
Well, Bentley was crying because Bentley was fighting for his sanity too. In the midst of this was a man who was demasculating him. When Bentley would witness Russell strangling me, Russell would go to Bentley, and it's okay. His name is open on line. I've shared his name online for my sake. But
Mhm.
what Bentley would literally have to deal with this man who would come down to his level and go, when I saw my mother being abused, I actually helped her, and you're a PUSSY for not helping your mother. He would also try to train me and my son in how to defend ourselves against him
Hmm.
in the midst of this. So he's demasculating my son, telling my son, when I saw that happen, I was more manly than you, making my son feel like he couldn't do anything further. On top of all this, now he's slapping him for crying. I told the school, I'm starting to go, okay, I'm leaving. Okay,
Mhm.
we're done. We're done. Now you touched my child, we're done. I could take all the things that you could do to me, but this is something entirely separate for an emotion when I have worked my whole life since 19 raising this child by myself to validate his existence,
Mhm.
to make sure he didn't get what I had raised growing up. And now here we are, and I'm like, okay, you're gonna abuse him, I'm done. I start thinking, okay, I need to leave. How do I leave? And I started Googling and I found Dr. Romani on YouTube.
Mhm.
And she started talking about narcissistic abuse.
Mhm.
And I I could tell you it was like fireworks. The terms, it lining up, the behaviors, the cycles. I was like, oh my gosh. What it helped me do was realize nothing was ever my fault.
Mhm.
All of that was projection. There was nothing wrong with me. This person is not fixable. They're not somebody that I can just get help for. The root of their disorder is
Mhm.
that they cannot and will not live in reality or take accountability. Like that is the one of the bases.
Mhm.
So learning those terms, learning mirroring, looking all the way back, I started putting it together and I'm like, oh my gosh, I started to believe it. But then when he would come home, I disconnect from my personal self, go back to fantastical delusion with him, all the way up until the day that he strangled me for the fourth and last time. I fought for my life, the longest and the hardest, the fourth time that this man, who, if we remember going all the way back, was picking me flowers, validating my trauma, telling me he wouldn't leave me, that he loved me. And now he's strangling me on multiple occasions simply because I want to leave.
Mhm. Mhm.
On the night that my husband strangled me, I wanted to leave. On November 8th of 2023, I made a decision. I'm not doing this anymore. He had told me, you need to learn to love yourself. And you know what? I thought, you're right. I should. And I started looking in the mirror, like TikTok told me. I started telling myself, I love you. I need you. I need you. Who else is going to have you? Like, I started really doing this. On that night, when my husband strangled me, it was longer than 8 minutes. I lost consciousness. He tried to break my neck during that. It wasn't just strangulation. This will all be heard in my trial. I've cleared this with the district attorneys. I've talked with you as well.
Mhm.
They are okay with this because as long as I'm telling the truth and I am and my story's consistent, they don't care that I'm saying this.
Mhm.
As long as I'm saying the same thing when I go to trial, we're good.
Mhm.
That night, my husband tried to kill me. The first time my husband took me to California, I believe his intent was to kill me and take my son
Mhm.
and raise him as his own. I think he was irritated with me and wanted to discard me. Before going to California, I had a dream of him shoving me off a mountain cliff.
Mhm.
Seems very, very specific now looking back. After his final arrest, when I got his phone, I was able to see where he was hiking us to on a Gaia GPS,
Mhm.
and it was a cliff.
Wow.
And I couldn't even believe
Wow.
that. I was like, what? He had marked it where we were supposed to go. I started looking at his Google searches and saw that he was looking up, trying to show my child how to self-please, which is a big red flag. This is not his child. This is an 11-year-old. This is a child that he's abused. He doesn't need to be showing him or having these conversations at all. He's looking up very inappropriate things. He's looking up how to, I finally got confirmation he was definitely on drugs the whole time. The night that my husband strangled me, he tried to break my neck. In the midst of strangling me, when I regained consciousness, I was able to gasp out, and I asked him to please let go. I thought, in all the spiritual teaching that this man has thought he's taught me, I'll appeal to what his abuser, his dad taught him. And I was like, all you have to do is let go. This is like just a choice. Take all the emotions away, right? All you have to do is let go. Just let go. Just let go of me. He wouldn't let go. A lot of it's in flashes. I could walk you through it, but it's probably really traumatic for some people. We all can imagine me rolling around on a floor trying to desperately get this man who is belted and practiced in jujitsu off of me, while he's choking me and pulling on my neck and body. At one point, he put my body on top of his in an MMA style of some kind, put my feet in between his, and then put me in a chokehold and was trying to separate my neck from my lower half by stretching his body with mine. It's really complicated, the number of things that were going on. He had grabbed my neck and slammed it to the side, trying to break my neck, but he was unsuccessful in doing so. At the end, I was exhausted. I didn't think I was coming out of this alive. I screamed out loud for my son. I was like, Bentley, call 911. And I thought for a second in my mind, oh my God, what if my son comes out? So I stopped. But even before I could finish that thought, I looked into my husband's face. And I didn't see my husband anymore, because for the first time in my life, I screamed for help while being strangled. And that is actually the point at which my husband truly tried to end my life, when he was sitting above me, looking down into my face with the same face that told me that he would never hurt me the way everyone in my life had before. And he put his hands for the final time around my throat, and he tried to end my life by strangling me. Because I had screamed. When I screamed, the switch on his face was so instant. It was like, you're going to get me in trouble. He squeezed until I passed out. When I came to, he was pacing, punching himself in the head, threatening to unalive himself. I tried to drink water. It came spewing out. It's very important for anyone listening, like, that we call this strangulation, not choking. So when I went to the police, that was one of the things that helped me, was I was saying the words strangulation. It's very important you get medical help, because over 50% of cases don't even have a marking. But internally they can tell. So I just want to, before we get into whatever you have to say in the questionings for this, I want to leave everyone at this ending point with, my case is as solid as it is because of the steps that I took after. I calmed him. He went to work the next day. I did not alert him to what I was doing. I went to a doctor. I was medically examined, had them mark my injuries. At that point, I still wasn't sure if I was going to call the police. There is a 1-day gap between the last strangulation and me calling, but that is because I owed a fine of $200 for a traffic ticket, and I called that day, verifiable by law enforcement, and paid it. So I was afraid to call the police and get arrested, so I wanted to pay my fine beforehand. So I paid this fine, and I was like, I need to be able to call them. When they did finally show up, the police were so flabbergasted. They're like, you could have called us and we wouldn't have arrested you. Like, we're looking at you. I had not realized how bad the damage was, but here we are. We are 6 months out. I have 2 more court hearings going on. We're going to a trial by jury. He has gaslit and tried to pretend that he doesn't even know what he's here for the entire time, and provided no defense. None. He's got no defense.
Okay. He's going with the Shaggy wasn't me defense, or just like...
Yes. He's literally going, Nothing happened. That's what he told them. Absolutely nothing happened.
Cool.
And he tried to tell the judge that at the PFA hearing too, and then followed it by saying, well, if you give me this PFA, I can't get my guns and I want my guns.
Oh.
And she was like, oh, well, we're going to give you a PFA. She actually, the reason I'm having a trial by jury is my judge feels that to some degree she will not be able to make that decision on her own because she saw me for the PFA hearing with my hemorrhaging in my eye, with my ligature marks on my neck. She
Mhm.
saw me and has some bias and prejudice formed before we get to that point,
Mhm.
which is very telling.
Yeah. And I think it's very fair because she does not want him to come back in your life on a contingency, right?
No, he cleared all $2,065 worth of a fine. That fine I paid on that I needed to make a payment. It was from house arrest from driving without a license. Yes, you can get put on house arrest for driving without a license. Just don't do it. But um, she cleared that after that PFA hearing. She exonerated $2,065. She also was like, "And girl, let me free your money so you can go."
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's
I've
amazing.
never seen that either. I just got this random letter in the mail, and I was like, "Oh. Okay." And it was striking to me. It was striking to me that I was believed. How about that? I think the most striking thing when I left my abuser is when I told people, they actually believed me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I've been afraid this whole time, but you guys all knew he was trash, but you didn't tell me. And then all the women have poured in every day since. Just 2 days ago, I had a whole nother girl. They keep coming. I knew him and he was terrible. And I just want to tell you. And I'm like, oh,
Wow.
so many of you. There's so many.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. He just wanted to spread that awful around. I mean, just
He
God
was
bless him.
raised and taught this. So, to be clear, his father was a narcissist who raised him this way. He
Mhm.
abused him heavily.
Mhm.
And in the end, what is sad for me is that somewhere along the way, the bit of empathy I feel, and the reason it was hard to leave was because what I was seeing was the potential of a human had he not been abused,
Mhm.
what he would have been able to be. Those little glimpses of um, who he was pretending to be for a second when he wasn't so stressed out.
Mhm.
I felt empathy for the child, not the adult. The little Russell who deserved to be taken away from his narcissist, the
Mhm.
Russell who deserved to be saved, the child that could have grown up to be a healthy person had someone paid attention to how much abuse he was in. Because I was a child born into abuse, and I also had been afraid of love, I empathized so deeply and I thought we were the same. But
Mhm.
we both are the representation of the generational outcome of domestic violence. We are both children raised in domestic violence, and one of us became the abuser and one of us became the perpetrator.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Lee, I cannot imagine the amount of strength it took for you to just walk us all through that. So thank you because
You're
you
welcome.
I know that every time you think about it and have to retell it, you relive it a little bit. And hopefully when you do relive it, it's with kinder eyes towards yourself, not towards your perpetrator. But you can
Yeah.
give yourself some grace and say, I made it through that. And I'm going to continue to make it because one, I already have. I have literally survived 100% of the days before me, right? My success rate is amazing. Um, but,
Yeah.
um, but it's not an easy thing to do. So I appreciate you so much. And you tell an incredible story, and it's your story. And I'm so proud of you for sharing it.
Thank you. And I thank you so much for this space. And if I can, I have a very short poem I'd like to wrap up at the end, which will explain a little, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So I hope everyone out there can hear this and maybe get some inspiration from this. The poem is something that I wrote after I left. It's called Incapable. Incapable. The words fall so easily off your lips and onto the floor. They pull around my feet and my skin soaks them in. Incapable of giving love. They seep into my bones. These words, they sit and ruminate. My inner child is banging on my rib cages with anxiety, screaming, "Come out and defend us." My inner child who is sick of feeling that what they have to offer as a person isn't enough to matter. Incapable of giving love? That's all I ever gave you, she screams. I can feel the tears of shame and pain streaming down our cheek. I sit and recall every second of the love I gave you, every ounce of energy, my poems, my secrets, my insecurities, my flaws, my honesty. I gave all in love, and yet I'm incapable. Maybe I don't know what love is because I thought I was giving it. I see my inner child ready to take all this blame, ready to absorb it, destroy herself so the other person doesn't seem so cruel. Make what they say true, she says, so that it can be swallowed. I see her and I can't. We won't be doing that, I said. We won't make you less so others can swallow you. We won't accept their words as truth, not this time. I won't let them take you and watch you drown yourself, not again. I grab her, I take her somewhere else. I sit with her and I tell her she is worthy. She is loved, she is seen, she is believed, she is heard, she is safe, and I sit with her and I hold her as she falls apart and I fall together, and I hold my inner child and I replace those broken words and whispers with, "You are capable of giving love and worthy of receiving it, and you have deserved it every day of your being." And I let those words dry on the pages of my skin.
Wow. Oh, that is so beautiful.
That Thank you for making that space for me. I hope that someone can see that this war that you may be fighting with someone like this, in the end, I hope you see it is not you, but it is them that is undeserving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being part of my community. I'm so glad I met you. You are
Me
an
too.
absolute light and an absolute inspiration. I'm so lucky to have found you on TikTok before they maybe take it away. We're not going to get into that,
Oh,
but
I hope not. Oh gosh. I need this space. There's just no other spaces where you can find this community.
well, I'm so glad you are part of the community now. And I hope that you are the first of many and that we continue to grow and support each other as we kind of make our way through this journey, because we are not alone. And all it takes is finding someone to connect with you to say, "God, I'm not crazy. There's
Right.
others. We can do this. You got out. It can be over." So
Yes.
thank
And
you
does it
for
blow our mind that they all say such similar things sometimes when we're comparing our texts?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh. There's a
Yeah.
playbook out there.
Right. Right. It's like they're all on the same team. And you know what? That's why
They
Team
are.
Bear. Team Bear.
Yes, team there. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate your time today. Is there anything else you wanted to cover? Anything else you wanted to shout out before we go? Otherwise, I will plug
Last
all your
bit of
socials and links at the bottom.
yes. Sorry, my ADHD makes these things difficult sometimes. I
No,
didn't know when to
you're
talk.
good.
The last thing I'd like to say before we disconnect is if a person strangles you just one time, just once, that person is more than 750% likely going to end your life within a year. And I would like people to hear that
Yeah.
big jump in number. Just one time is all it takes. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I know he put his hands on me, but it didn't leave a mark or it didn't do this or that, that does not mean anything towards the lethality of non-fatal strangulation. Thank you.
Yes. Excellent call out. Absolutely. Because as someone who's experienced that, it's absolutely 100% the consideration when I left. I was like, oh, this is going to be over. Either I'm going to choose to leave or he's going to choose it for me. And we can't have that, right?
No,
So,
no, I'm so glad you're here today.
thank you.
I am. We're both glad to be here today. Thank gosh.
We made it.
Yeah.
So, thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Well, you have a good day. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
close out today's episode, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much to Lee for coming here and sharing her story with so much heart, candor, and so much bravery. I know how hard it is to tell a story without reliving it, and in order to prep for this interview, she had to walk me through it once, get her thoughts organized, and go through all of this again today. So for that, Lee, thank you. Thank you so much for trusting me with your story and sharing it with my audience. You inspire me and have made such an impact on me in the short time that I've been following you. So thank you. Thank you so much for your voice, your bravery, and your kindness. I welcome you back anytime. One other note before we part is about Montanay Davis. On April 1st, Montanay posted a TikTok slideshow saying, "If I ever lose my battle with mental health, make sure my girls are straight, remind them of the good times, and I pray they forgive me." And I've seen posts like that from other mamas on TikTok before, and I've reached out. I always reach out. I'm never not going to reach out. If I see you, I want you to know that you've been seen because I get it. So I reached out and I didn't hear back. And well, her post had a lot of likes and a lot of comments. So I didn't expect to hear back. I never expect to. But oftentimes I do. And even if I don't hear back, they'll post another video and I'll be able to move on. Well, a week had passed and she hadn't posted another video, so I left a comment just to let her know, hey, I'm still here, still checking on you. And a couple of days after that comment, someone replied to me saying she's gone. And because of the nature of the internet and because of TikTok and clout chasers and trolls, trust but verify. So I Googled her name. And on April 3rd, Montanay's boyfriend took her life. This podcast exists because of women like Montanay. And for every single Montanay that came before and every single Montanay that will come after. I make this podcast so that we do not have this anymore. Brave women like Lee come to share their stories so that it doesn't happen anymore. It is so hard to leave. It is so hard to see your way out. And all I want to accomplish with this podcast, if it's one listener or 5 million, all that I want to accomplish is for the one person who needs to hear it and know that they have a way out. That this has been done before and it will be done again. Because my heart cannot take another Myra Davis. My heart cannot take another Montanay. Montanay was 26 years old. She leaves behind 2 beautiful daughters. Rest in peace, Montanay. If you want to be a part of the community of absolutely fearless women, fearless mothers who are fighting every day for their kids and their sanity and their femininity and their sexuality and their joy and their career and their happiness and for their fucking life, I invite you to join us. You can follow me on TikTok while we have it at Mom with Issues. I'm so grateful and thankful for every single listener. Thank you so much for choosing to spend time with me today. And I'll shout out some resources at the end, and you can find the links in the show notes. I hope you have a wonderful Mother's Day. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week. If you're experiencing domestic violence in the U.S., you can get help at the Domestic Violence Hotline. The phone number is 1-800-799-7233. They also have a chat option available via Google if you're not in a safe space to talk. You can find statistics for domestic violence and strangulation at ncadv.org/statistics. If you find yourself dealing with a narcissist, I recommend the book Gaslighting: Recognize Manipulative and Emotionally Abusive People and Break Free by Dr. Stephanie Moulton Sarkey. Take care of yourself, mamas.